I want to talk about grinding in games. I'm going to use Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow as our example here, because hopefully it's old and obscure enough that people won't be whiny shitheads and we can actually talk about the issues at hand. As a kid, I loved the previous title, Aria of Sorrow. The tight controls, the smooth, enjoyable movement, the sense of exploration, the satisfaction of murdering the monsters and using their powers to destroy your enemies. I couldn't wait to play the sequel. A couple of notes before we get started. If you think the game footage here is boring and don't want to watch the video because of it, there's a point to that. I'm Disney level with my subtlety here. Stare at the footage. Keep staring. Bear with me, it's all part of the point. Now, in these two Castlevania games, when you kill a monster, sometimes you absorb its soul and can then use its magic. You shoot lasers, you turn people into stone, you shit fire, you get the idea. Here's the key word. Sometimes you get a soul. As in, there's a % chance it'll drop. And that's where the grinding starts. Before we really dig into this topic, I hear some of you saying, but man, you don't have to do the grinding in games, you can choose not to. I'm gonna tell you a little story. There's an 8-year-old kid whose daily chore it is to wash the dishes. One day, he decides not to wash the dishes, and his mother beats him with a tire iron and throws his unconscious body into bed. Isn't that the same thing as actually doing the dishes and just going to bed? After all, he still reached the end of the day. Moral of the story, something isn't a choice if you're punished for not doing it, and that is exactly what most of these games do. If you don't do the grinding to get all the souls or all the secret coins or all the Furbies or whatever the fuck it is, you get the bad ending. But it's all the same, right? You still completed the game. Woo! No, it's not the fucking same. See, in the first title, Aria of Sorrow, souls weren't usually that hard to come by. Yeah, some were a bitch, but a little spree murder and you could catch them all without much trouble. The ones that sucked to get were an unfortunate part of the game, but easy to overlook, because you would never really spend more than 10 minutes trying to get even the rarest of souls. Evidently, that wasn't good enough for Konami. No, their players needed to truly suffer. Dawn of Sorrow added an explicit rarity system to the souls, and it plays like this. If a monster has 1 star, it's likely you'll get it through the normal course of play. You'll probably end up with a handful of 2-star souls by the end of the game, and if you get a 3-star soul, oh boy, go buy a lottery ticket, because you are on fire! What this means is, even if the game isn't locking the story up behind their collectibles, again, though this game is the exception, most do, they're also locking up the mechanics of the game. You know those things that make Metroidvania-style games fun? I started on this grind fest because I wanted to be able to play with all the cool powers. Imagine going through a Metroid game without ever getting the screw attack, or the super missiles, or the charge beam, or the speed booster. If you can't see the problem with that, with literally locking the player out of playing with their game until they treat it like a job and do the requisite hours of dry, repetitive fucking tax filing level gameplay before they're allowed to have fun with the game they bought, well, listen on.
Hark!
The heavens cry.
We have heard your woes of grinding, and bequeath unto you the Soul Eater Ring, which, for a truly absurd amount of money, doubles the likelihood a soul will drop.
Wait. Stop. Did you catch that? It's an item that you have to grind for that makes grinding easier. Just sit with that for a minute. Okay, let's go where this takes us. Now, we have 2 reasons to get the Soul Eater Ring. A, we want the good ending, which, if we're going through this game blind, we guess by game conventions probably means we need all the collectibles. And B, we want to have fun playing with the game's toys, which are the souls. Thus, we need the Soul Eater Ring to make 3-star souls even possible to get without resorting to child slavery so that some impoverished mook's second-born can grind it for us over the course of his entire young adult life. Thus, we need money. In Dawn, one of the best ways of getting money is getting a bunch of specific souls, and through the game's crafting system, using them to upgrade cheap weapons and then selling them back to the merchant at a profit. But we can't really get souls at a decent rate without a decent luck score. Best way to up luck? Grind for the soul of the Ghost Dancer, which, when equipped, bumps your luck for each Ghost Dancer soul you have up to 9. Before this video began, I spent literally an entire hour doing nothing but running into a room, killing the closest ghost, and running out of the room to reset it to get 9 of these fuckers. An hour. No breaks, no slowing down. And I was using the optimal farming strategy I looked up online. An hour of tedious, gut-wrenching grinding to get souls that allow me to grind for souls to sell for money to get an item that allows me to grind for souls in a single-player game. So after my hour of grinding for Ghost Dancer souls, I sat here and did this. About every 20 minutes netted me 50,000 gold after I enchanted the weapons and sold them. I'd need to do this 6 times to get the 300k I need for the Soul Eater ring. That's 2 more whole hours of running back and forth in this corridor if I'm lucky. Is this what we came to Castlevania to do? Really? Hold right, then left, ad nauseum for literally hours on end? Castlevania is the grandfather of games like Dark Souls, for Christ's sake. Games that test your skill, your ability to learn. Games that engage your sense of exploration and wonder. Games that are fucking hard, but feel really rewarding when you finally beat that goddamn boss. I ask again, is this what we came here for? Is this what Castlevania is about? Now, despite my better judgment, and knowing full well that this is going to make you forget every point I've just made because you're all blinded by your inability to even bear hearing negative comments about the things you like because you take criticism about them as criticism of you, I'm going to dive into a few other examples of how grinding has fucked with and continues to fuck with games, even some of those we have fond memories of. I could write a book on this next sentence, but suffice to say, a narrative has to flow just so to keep a player interested. Doubly so if the writers are trying to make the players care about the characters and think about them in some capacity like you would think about real people. Empathy, attachment, and the like. Caring about what happens to them rather than treating them like the titular character in Kitten Canon. Most RPGs, JRPGs in particular, fail to understand this. I've even heard this kind of thing said by my friends who love JRPGs, and having played through some games with them, it's true. We would both sit there and laugh at how melodramatic, poorly written, and just plain dumb the cutscenes were. Don't worry, this relates to grinding, just hold on. I'm gonna say something. If you were to play Final Fantasy VII for the first time as an adult, you wouldn't be sad that Aeris died. I know you can't see past the nostalgia, but a large part of that shock that resonated for people at the time wasn't because we really cared about her character. She's not amazingly deep and compelling. She's not brilliantly written or super original. Most of the resonance from that scene was because until that point, we had never thought that characters in games could permanently die. It was many of our first instances seeing game characters bite it for good, and it forced us to think about them differently. This was our first step towards thinking of video game characters like real people, and it jarred us. But today, living in a world where games like Heavy Rain and Mass Effect have seen widespread popularity, seeing that Aeris cutscene for the first time, no, you wouldn't be sad. You'd be pissed that you spent so much time leveling the goddamn character and giving her all this gear for the game to take it away from you suddenly. This is what a lot of JRPGs still do in a way. They're banking on the fact that you've spent a lot of time grinding on the mechanics of the character and watching little numbers go ding to make you care. It's the only way, aside from making the characters beautiful, flawless self-inserts, that they'll convince the player to give a shit about them. Notice how even the people who like grinding talk about it. How many times have you been discussing a game with your friends and they were like, "Oh man, that drop sucks to get. I must have ran that like 50 fucking times before I finally got it." Or, "Yeah, it blows, but once you level enough to get past the boss, then it's fine." Think about some of the reasons why people hated Diablo 3 initially. Gear would drop that had enchantments on it that were literally pointless for your class, meaning you had to grind more to get the useful drops. People hated that. Think about what people hated about Destiny on launch, and why the Loot Cave became a popular alternative to other forms of grinding. Why people quit playing Warframe. Why people quit World of Tanks. And I could go on and on about grinding in MMOs, but I'll leave it to a few sentences. One of my friends who is always balls deep in whatever MMO said to me, "One of the primary reasons I enjoy MMOs is showing off what I've done, what I have that other people don't. If you want to keep that kind of feeling in games, that tedious struggle that you went through that no one else did, that got you the shiniest codpiece so you could rub your sweaty bulge across new players' faces, that's fine." I'm serious. Maybe that's where grinding can exist in an MMO. Wouldn't it be more satisfying if the adamantium condom your max level character wears came from a mechanical challenge, not a time-based one? An instance that you and your guild could beat that most other players in the game aren't skilled enough to surmount. I know that in such a situation there's further complication concerning the amount of people who get to play all the game's content, but even so, I don't think this is an impossible task for designers, particularly with the ridiculous amount of money and time that goes into making an MMO. That aside, back in the day, I was able to do endgame instances of Guild Wars with barely any grinding at all. I went through the story, I hit max level, I got the top tier gear, I got the epic spell I needed for my build, I did PvE and PvP with my guild. I had fun with the game. I got to play with the toys. And people who wanted to grind still got their shiny cocksocks. But really, for single-player games, I shouldn't even have to be talking about this. It's 2015. We're far beyond the point where game developers have to find ways to artificially lengthen game time to get around the tiny memory limit of the medium. But evidently I do, because there are entire games that are about grinding, and they are very successful. And that means that other games think that they can capitalize on that success by adding grinding into their games. Video games can be fun-filled romps through imaginary lands. They can be a challenge to surmount, to hone ourselves on, tests of both our skill and our cunning. They can be engaging, they can be emotional, they can tell fantastic stories and capture our imaginations and entrance us in ways that other mediums can't. They can be these things, or they can be filled with grinding.